So we're going to talk Windows 10 migration best practices here. This session is really just a front end on top of the white paper. If you've done anything to do with Windows 10 so far within your organization, I think a lot of this is going to be revision. And even if you haven't approached Windows 10, a lot of what you need to do is the same, but there are some key differences. So I'm going to touch on a few of those points in this presentation, but the real meat on this is in the white paper. So I would recommend you go ahead and grab that. So we're going to cover a few things as part of this session. We're going to cover how you can kickstart that migration and how this white paper and the supplied collateral is going to help you accelerate the point to get to deploying Windows 10. We're going to cover some background on what Windows 10 is all about. I'm going to talk a little about why we think Microsoft has changed some of its strategy and some of the things that they have changed. We're going to talk about some best practices and common pitfalls. You'll see those dotted through the deck that I have here and also throughout the white paper. There's a real emphasis on trying to help you avoid the missteps that we see our customers making on a fairly regular basis. And then finally, I'm just going to do a quick reminder of where to get the information from and also how you can use that information to execute your Windows 10 migration. So these are the topics that I'm going to try and cover. I'll touch on some of these a little lighter than others, but hopefully, as I say, we can get out on time. But I'm going to touch on the key points that I do want you to remember. So the first one, let's talk about how you can approach your Windows 10 migration. Again, you're going to be pretty familiar with these options, but I'm going to go through them anyway. The first one is that you can now do an in-place upgrade from most of the previous versions of Windows, from Windows 7 onwards. We tend to see smaller organizations going for this option, but it is something that larger organizations can consider in specific use cases. So I'd be a little careful with this option because on the face of it, it looks great. You preserve everything, all of your settings, all of the customer data or your user data that's on there. It really looks good. You also have a rollback option there, so if something goes hideously wrong, you can get back to just about where you started. So as I say, we have a lot of customers that get really excited by this option, and Microsoft does like to push this because it takes away the need to have any sort of third-party tool involved in the process. The problem you have is usually around compatibility, and that's application compatibility or third-party apps like encryption. You can get yourself tied up in serious problems, and I'll give you an example of where that tends to happen. There are some applications that are just compatible with Windows 7 and not with Windows 10, and there are some that are compatible with Windows 10 and not with Windows 7. So at what point do you do your upgrade? You can't upgrade your applications that on Windows 7 that are not compatible with Windows 10, and vice versa. So if you take, for example, something that's only released for Windows 10, if you're on Windows 7, you can't upgrade with that in place. If you upgrade, that Windows 7 version of the app is not going to work in Windows 10. And we've seen some scenarios where a machine won't actually boot because of some serious compatibility issue. So it may not happen, and you may be in a good place, but I just give you a fair warning that we've seen this more often than not. So I think I'm touched on this point already. I have seen most organizations consider this in places where machines are simple. So some of our customers who are airlines, for example, if you've got a lounge that's sitting out there, those machines aren't particularly critical. They tend to have a standard small set of applications on there. Why not go ahead and do an upgrade on those? That tends to work pretty well. But for most organizations, having a standard image and being able to do a fresh install is usually the way to go. So the next one is the more common option that we see, which is the traditional wipe and reload. Now, hopefully you're familiar with the key benefits of this. I think the key thing is that this also allows you to do bare metal imaging as well, where the upgrade option is not going to allow you to do that. So if you do just have an exclusive in-place upgrade process, you are going to have to think about how you get machines from bare metal to your standard image. So often you would need two processors anyway. So that's one of the reasons that we see this being most common. There's also some changes from BIOS to UEFI that you need to think about, and doing that as part of this process is a lot easier. And one of the things that I tend to see our customers doing, if you have a major upgrade of an application you need to do, like Office or something similar, doing it as part of a wipe and reload strategy kind of gets you that upgrade for free. And so that's another good reason why customers consider this. There are a few reasons why customers don't like this process. You do need to think about what we call a personality migration. You do need to think about that data migration, and that can be a little tricky. So luckily we have a tool, PC Transplant, that provides you with the basics to be able to do that, but it can be a complex process to make sure you are transferring all of that data from the previous machine to the new one. So customers can quite often store their data in places that you're not expecting, and that is a potential problem. You do also have to think about drivers as well. So if you're doing a fresh install, you need to make sure you've got the new version of the drivers there. That, again, is something you need to consider. Symantec has some tools in that area, and I'll talk through some of that later on in this session. The other things I think to bear in mind is to make sure you get your applications right. And I'll talk a little bit later about the difference between a thin and a fat image, and I'll cover more about the application part then. So there is a third option that customers sometimes do, and that's what we call a wipe and replace. I think this tends to be work best when you're doing a hardware refresh anyway, but this is really just the same as a wipe and reload, but you are giving a customer, or your user, sorry, a new machine to replace their old one, so you just do a straight trade. That has some problems, again, with data migration. It works really well if your users tend to store their data in the cloud or in some separate share. It can work really well because you can just do a straight swap. If you're not planning to do a hardware refresh, I wouldn't go through the expense of doing that just to make this part easier. The tools are good enough, are plenty good enough to do a wipe and reload strategy and make that work. So as mentioned, I will just touch on the point down here. We often see a combination of these strategies with our customers. So there's nothing stopping you from using all three of these in different places and gaining the benefits that they provide. We do focus mostly on the first two that I mentioned. The wipe and replace is just a variation on the second one. But in the white paper, you'll see that we do focus mostly on the first two. So let's look at those things that you need to consider when you're planning your Windows 10 migration. The first one I wanted to call out is Internet Explorer 11. So some of our customers, especially those in finance, have a lot of applications and tools that are browser dependent. I would recommend thorough testing if you're going to be upgrading to Internet Explorer 11 as part of this process. It's very easy to not know what's out there in your environment and what depends on Internet Explorer. So I would recommend you speaking to all of the areas of your business and trying to do a good as possible job finding out what's out there. There are third-party tools, and I kind of hasten to mention this because obviously we had some virtualization technology that was able to help you with this, which unfortunately is not part of our portfolio anymore. But there are third-party tools available that would allow you to support previous browsers in your Windows 10 environment. So they do exist, and in certain key cases, they can be a huge help. So we'd always recommend trying to fix things up front. If you are thinking about an in-place upgrade strategy, there's nothing stopping you from upgrading, i.e., before you go ahead and do that in-place upgrade, and you'll get ahead of most of the issues that you'll see as part of that. So I just wanted to cover very quickly the flavors of Windows 10. Again, all of this is probably going to be revision. We wrote the white paper to keep it at a level where somebody without that much knowledge of a migration process can pick it up and pretty much go from a standing start till the very end. So you'll probably find when you're reading it, if you're seasoned, there's certain sections that you can probably skip. But we do cover the different flavors of Windows, and I think that's important to consider. So Windows 10 Home, as the name suggests, is usually a consumer-focused operating system. We don't tend to see it in a business setting. The only reason I wanted to pick it up is that if you have a BYOD strategy, you may find that this turns up in your organization. You should try and avoid that if possible because you can't join it to the domain, and it is on the most aggressive update branch as well. So I would be very careful when you do see Windows 10 as Home as part of your organization. Much more common is to see Windows 10 Pro. So you have some control over updates. You can join it to the domain, and it's a very common operating system that we would tend to see in the small to medium-sized space. And the final one is Windows 10 Enterprise. As the name suggests, this is obviously targeted for higher-end organizations. It's the only one that you can put onto the long-term service branch, and I'll talk about that in just a second. So it's where you get the most control over your updates. And it does provide a large range of capabilities. So if you're considering that, I would read up on the differences between Pro and Enterprise to make sure that if you're going to go for Pro, that it does have everything that you need. The good news is that you can do an upgrade in place from Pro to Enterprise to activate those extra features. So let's talk about those service branches. So Microsoft has made a significant change, as probably everyone is aware now, to their kind of updating and patching process. I think we like a lot about what Microsoft has done here. I think it makes sense to have a stable base and to add these feature update packs on top. You know, it helps them to sort of monetize the operating system in a slightly different way. So, you know, we try to support this model as far as we possibly can. The most important thing you need to understand here is how quickly you're going to consume these feature updates and whether you want to at all. So the three options you have are current branch. So this is the default for Windows Home and is an option for Pro and Enterprise. This means you're getting the updates as soon as they come along. This is a risky strategy, and it's not one that we would tend to recommend. The next one is current branch for business, and this is something that we're far more likely to see in a business setting. You get 4 months of leeway between the updates being released and this flavor of the branch receiving them. So you get that kind of comfort zone. You get them pretty quickly, but you've got that buffer where consumers are already knocking off most of the rough edges. It's worth mentioning that the current branch for business only supports the most 2 recent builds, so you would have to be up to date with that process. And then finally, the long-term service branch. This is the one that, you know, anything that you don't want to change in an unmanaged way, you need to put them on the long-term service branch. And you do need Windows 10 Enterprise version to be able to do that. So this is more akin to what we're used to, having the most control over when updates reach that operating system. So I do want to talk a bit about hardware-independent imaging as well. There's not too much that changes in this process compared to previous versions, but I did want to touch on it a little bit just to make sure that you're covering off all of the key pieces. So hopefully most of you are aware of what a hardware-independent image is. It's a single image that you deploy within your organization, and you put the specific drivers required for each piece of hardware injected into that image as part of the process of deploying. It's a fantastic option as opposed to having different images for the different pieces of hardware, especially as those I'd say the number of hardware models that you have in your organization tends to grow. And I'd say some of our customers are really good at standardizing on a manufacturer, but not so much on a model. So even if you do have a single manufacturer for your hardware, quite often you'll see a ton of different models as you go through those refresh cycles. And we're seeing that getting more aggressive, not slower. So a hardware-independent image is a really good thing to try and achieve. One of the most important things to consider with hardware independence is the drivers. Now, driver management should be easy. It should be super easy to manage drivers within Windows. The trouble is, hardware manufacturers don't always seem to be that great at writing drivers. I mean, that's a little bit of an understatement with underline and an exclamation mark on the end. They're super lazy when they come to do this, and there are very subtle differences between what would appear to be the same drivers. So it can be tricky to manage this, and this is probably your biggest challenge. We do have a couple of options on how to manage that process. So we do have a tool called Deploy Anywhere, which hopefully some of you have seen, and hopefully some of you are using. This is a really, really good tool for managing drivers. It automates the process. You just throw them all into the database, and we do all the hard work of trying to decide what goes where. The problem is, because of the problem I just spoke about, because those drivers are not always well written, the logic that we have to create to sort through that is incredibly complex, and it doesn't always work. I'll be happy to say that up front. I see a few nodding heads out there. One of the other problems that you might have is that when something goes wrong, it's a little tricky to troubleshoot exactly what's happened. And we introduced something called driver tagging to be able to help that, but still we see some challenges with that process. So as part of the white paper, we have also proposed an alternative approach, which is to use DISM, which is a little bit more manual in the sense that you have to create a folder with the drivers for that hardware, but it is super robust. You're going to go pretty hard to go wrong there. If you know that those drivers are where they need to be, then you know that this process is going to work. And one of the things that I'm putting some serious thought into, and we've had a lot of discussions within the engineering team, is whether we can put a front end on this DISM process just to make it easier to consume for those that aren't maybe familiar or comfortable with this scripted approach. So look out for some potential updates in that area. So I mentioned before that it's worth considering whether to do a thick or a thin image or some kind of combination. We define a thick image as something that has everything that your users need inside that image. It has some benefits because you don't need to do any post-imaging processing, so you don't need to layer on any apps on top. Everything is in there. You put the image on, and the user's away. They have the lowest amount of downtime, and it's the least complex. It has some major downsides. One of those is that the image size tends to get very big. You tend to give applications to people that don't need them, and that does have a licensing implication in most scenarios. So if you're incredibly standard across your organization, fantastic. Get everything in there. It's super easy. But I would say most customers don't go for that option. The next one is a thin image, which is the complete opposite. You just have the bare minimum as part of that image, and then you layer on the applications based on the profile of the user that is going to be using that machine. We see a lot of customers going for this option. It's very flexible. You can very easily create jobs within Deployment Solution and Go Solution Suite that will layer on these applications based on profile. It works pretty well. The problem is that it tends to take longer to complete the migration. You put down that image, and then you have to layer on the applications, and sometimes that can take a very long time. So what we tend to recommend is this hybrid approach, where you include applications that don't tend to change very much, that you have a site license to be able to use, and those that are used by the majority of your users. But this is a sliding scale. You can get as close to either end as you want to get, but just consider that the more you include in the image, the more changes you are going to have to make to that standard gold image. So if you need to do a regular update on a certain application, you'll have to continually refine that image before it goes out, and that can get a bit tricky. So let's cover next preparing your reference image. There's a few different ways to do this. I was doing this as a customer probably about 12 years ago. We just had a piece of hardware sitting on the desk, which we would build as a kind of a gold standard using a scripted install. So we had a job within what was Deployment Solution 6 at the time that put on the operating system, added all the applications, did all the configuration, and popped out a gold image. And anytime we needed to make a tweak, we would just go in and tweak the job and build the machine again. That tends to be the process that customers use, but we do have an improvement that you can make to that process by using a virtual machine. So I see a lot of customers doing this, and it's something that we do support. There's no issues using a virtual machine as your gold image. We haven't seen any real problems with that process. I'm not saying that nothing exists, but certainly we haven't heard about that. So we recommend building a virtual machine. And again, you can still use that same process within our deployment products. Have a scripted install, have all your applications to make it into as fat an image as you want to have. And you're making sure then that you're building the same image time and time again. And the other benefit of using a virtual machine is that you can reset the snapshot once you've captured your image. Sysprep has a limitation. The more times you run it, and then you need to reactivate Windows, there's a limitation on how often you can do that. So you can get around that using a virtual machine as well. So again, this is super light, this information, because everything is in the white paper. I didn't want to just read through the white paper in front of you, so I'd encourage you to go get that. There's a ton more information in there. And just to give you an idea, I'm not going to read through this slide because there's a lot on here, but this is the kind of detail that we go to in the white paper. We give you really a step-by-step process that you need to go through, everything that you should run to prepare. There's a ton of stuff that I haven't even touched on that you need to consider that is in there. But we've tried to give you as much as possible. And I want to stop here just for a second that these things are always best when they're community assisted. One of the interesting things about being a product manager is that I don't sit there imaging Windows 10 machines every day. It's just a fact of life. I cover a lot of products within the portfolio. So I spend as much time as I possibly can using the products, but our partners and our customers are the people, you guys are the people that are doing this on a day-to-day basis, that come up with improved and refined processes. So what I would ask is we have that Windows 10 microsite that I mentioned in the keynote yesterday. Please come and join us as part of that. And if you've got something really cool that we haven't included that you think everyone would benefit from, let me know. We're going to be constantly refining this white paper and the collateral that we provide with the updates that you're going to give us. So please, come and help us to make this the best possible process that it can be. But I think we've actually started off with something pretty good here. So the next thing I wanted to discuss quickly is the readiness assessment. You've got a couple of options here. The first one is to run some kind of report to make sure that you've got what you need to do a Windows 10 update. So it's pretty straightforward to understand the requirements of Windows 10. And we actually provide, as part of the collateral, a report that you can import and will tell you whether there are any issues within your environment. So we do all of that work for you, and you can stave off any issues up front before you get into any trouble. There is another option. The Windows 10 setup.exe gives you the option to do a kind of a scan only, and it will give you a really good assessment of whether that machine is going to have any issues with accepting Windows 10. I'd say the second one is probably a little bit more robust, but personally I think that's overkill. I think you're going to get pretty much where you need to go with the report. So that is included, so you can grab hold of that. This is an example of what the report looks like. The one thing I've highlighted here is that this report does, as you would expect, utilize inventory information. So if your inventory information is not up to date, this is not really going to work too well for you. So make sure that you are receiving good, healthy, up-to-date inventory from those machines. So the final bit that I wanted to cover, and again, I've flown through this pretty quickly to fit us in time, and I also want to take some questions as well, is to give you sort of some final tips. And I think I've probably covered most of these already, but just grab the white paper, import the jobs that we provided, use that as the basis for your process if you haven't created one already, and you will already be, I reckon, 90% of the way there, I would say, possibly even more. Follow the tips in the white paper to layer on your applications, make sure the configuration is right, make sure that your user migration process is where it needs to be as well. Again, we've got that all covered in there too. I've highlighted here to test. Now that sounds really dumb to say test, but because of some of the changes in Windows 10, I think the level of testing that we advise our customers to do is a step above anything before. We've seen too many pitfalls, too many issues, too many changes. And another thing is, testing is not just about making sure that the machine works. Testing is also about making sure that your users are comfortable adopting Windows 10 and what comes along with that. There are some significant changes, especially if you're coming from Windows 7 to the user experience. So make sure that you're considering the material that you should get out to your customers so that when they land and they're sitting in front of Windows 10, they don't get lost or have any problems finding the things that they need. So don't just test the kind of process. And I think there's I tend to see, especially some sort of more engineering-focused people, focusing very much on the process and less about the people part of this migration. But do consider that as well, because it can be. Some users don't like change. It's just a fact of life. So please, I hear some people laughing there, it's true. So the fact that you're being forced to upgrade is sometimes an issue for, especially for end users. Windows 7, and in some cases Windows XP, was working great. They're like, why do you need to change? Why have I got to learn? Especially when Windows 7 was also obviously a big change for users to absorb. So it's worth educating users on why you need to upgrade, what the benefits of more modern versions of Windows are, that it's more secure, that it's faster in theory, and that it's going to be the supported process going forward. Make sure that your users understand that, because a migration has a part of psychology about it as well, and we try to include as much of that information as well as we can. I've already mentioned about the community. I can't keep underlining this enough. I checked the membership of our sponsor group on Connect again. We're just about to top 1,000 users. So if anybody's not a member, come join us. I like that 1,000 number. So, but we do talk about these things. We will read, as I say, everything that you post on there. And we also have some great community members as well that have been around a long time. I think there's a few of them here who spend a lot of time and enjoy helping out the community as well. And it's something that I'm going to try and do as much of as possible moving forward, is to foster that community spirit, because I've been around these products for probably 12 years now, and one thing that's always pleased me and always been something that our customers I know have enjoyed is that community spirit, is knowing who we are, being able to get one-to-one contact with us, and also being able to contact the community and other users as well. And we're trying to do as much fostering of that as possible through the user groups and everything else that we do. And again, I've already mentioned, I do want to hear from you about refinements to this process. The white paper, as I say, I think is a really great start, and we have commissioned some outside help to create that paper. We have spoken to people that do this thing day in and day out. So it's not just a software company making a best guess. We have really invested in this, but we do want to make it as good as we possibly can. So I'm going to stop there. So again, it's a whistle-stop tour to Windows 10. It may be that you know everything that's on these slides, and it's just been a quick refresher. But for those of you, and especially people that pick this up who are outside of this room here, if you really are struggling with Windows 10, this is going to really help you and prove to you that we do have a great Windows 10 story. Microsoft, I've seen a lot of examples of where they're using Windows 10 to try and forklift third-party solutions out of our customers, and they're saying things like, "Oh, they don't support Windows 10. They're not going to support us moving forward. You need to get over to our tools." And I understand why they're doing that. It's a very effective tool, but using this and using the white paper, this is a way to demonstrate that we do have a great story. And please be rest assured that we're not going away. We are moving with everything that Microsoft is doing. You can see some of the things that we've added to ITMS are a direct result of some of these changes that Microsoft have just dumped into the market, and it is causing some havoc out there, but hopefully you've seen that we're responding to it very quickly. We're coming up with new things like peer-to-peer to be able to support those. So not only are we able to support Windows 10 as well as we have any other operating system, it's also forcing us to add things like peer-to-peer, which maybe we wouldn't have done otherwise. We've always known that peer-to-peer is a great thing to do, but it's actually forcing us to do some really great innovative things. So I'm encouraged by what Windows is doing, by what the industry is doing as well. I mean, obviously we're talking about Windows 10 here. There's another story for Macs, and eventually, hopefully, we'll be able to talk to you more about the more modern and mobile things. We've got a lot of things that we're considering in that area as well. So I'll go ahead and stop there. Probably got, I think we've got 10 minutes for questions if we've got some. So.
Where do we find the white paper?
So the white paper is available through the Bright Talk forum. We also have another landing page. Did that go live yet?
It has either today or tomorrow it will go live. So we're going to send out a link, actually an email to all you guys after this. We'll have links to all the presentations, the videos, white paper, etc. So you'll have direct access to all of those things.
Yeah, and the collateral is on the Windows 10 microsite, which is we'll send you a link to that as well. So if you're pretty comfortable with Windows 10 and just want to see the collateral, you can go straight on there today. It's there. You can grab it. But obviously, we'll have the Windows 10 white paper to go with that as well. So. Yep, question over there. Oh, we're going to grab a microphone here, I think, just so we can capture the question.
For the update test that you were discussing at the very end of the presentation for validating Windows 10 will work, does it do it for all versions, so like 15.11, 16.07, 17.03?
Actually, that's a good question. Well, I think if you use, do you mean the setup.exe scan to see if if you just use the correct version of that, it will do that.
What about the other one that was above it?
The report?
Yeah.
Yeah, so I think as far as we're aware, the requirements across those versions haven't changed. So that report is going to be standard right now. If anything does change, and invariably it will. I mean, this is another fascinating point that I can see the benefits of these feature pack updates. They have, they cause all kinds of problems, like how big are they going to get? I mean, I don't know where that process ends. But at some point, you feel that Microsoft's going to have to do something to update Windows 10 to something different. So they can't just keep doing these feature packs forever. So invariably, I think while we go through this feature pack process, there will be a change in requirements, and we will have to adapt the report to do that, because that is created by us, and it's not magically pulling from anything to do with Windows 10. So if anybody does see any issues with that at any point, please let us know, but we're going to try hard to keep ahead of the game there as well. Okay, yeah.
The point about IE11, getting that testing out of the way ahead of time is really huge. The one thing that I wanted to call out is IE11 Enterprise Mode. If you get all of your applications tested, if they don't work in IE11, you can fail back all the way to IE8, and it's more effective than compatibility mode. Any work you do on that is also going to be supported if you decide to let your users use Edge, so that if they enter a specific URL, it will pop open. If they enter it in Edge, you can configure it so it will pop open IE11 and either render an IE11 or render with an IE8 rendering engine, and it really cuts down your deployment process. And if you can get through that, getting to Windows 10, that's like half of the level of effort. It saved us a huge amount of time, and all of that you do it once, and it makes using these tools to get those things out a lot easier.
Yeah, superb. Thank you very much. Have you experienced any problems with that, or has that been pretty seamless?
No, we've got some pretty old legacy tools from various vendors, and it's been flawless for us. We've got everything from ActiveX, every possible thing that you could think of that you wouldn't want to have in terms of upgrading. We've seen it in our environment, and that alone really, there were only one application that we came up with that we really couldn't come up with a solid answer for. And we went back to the vendor and worked on a solution for them, so we upgraded the application, and that was really the only time we had to do that.
Okay, sounds good. It's a question maybe for the group. Has anybody had any issues going back to a vendor and trying to get things updated? I mean, this is the kind of things that would keep me up at night, or used to, making sure that things were compatible. Anybody got any stories around whether how they've been able to overcome some of those application compatibility issues, or has everyone got a pretty good case? Anybody want to volunteer some stories?
I don't really have a story. You're looking at, I'm laughing and looking at one of my colleagues over there. We have no success in this process, but the major application used in our CSTK shops is an AS400 application. There's a Win32 client, and it's just horrible. And we've been begging them to change their installation process from a process in which requires a phone call to them to get a licensing key or something stupid like that, and get it in MSI format. And they're dealing with mom and pop shops. We're the unusual bucket in which we have a pretty sizable organization that's looking to mature some of the processes that we do, and we're not getting anywhere quickly with them. So
Yeah,
no success with them.
Okay, that's a great story. And the reason I brought it up is that when people are planning a migration and you're communicating timelines, bear that in mind, because if you don't give yourself enough headway to sort out those compatibility issues, it will make you become you may become unstuck. So if you're in the kind of industry, we see it a lot in finance with some of those finance applications. That's probably the first place to go, start testing. But thank you for that. That's great. Okay, I think we're good. Thank you very much.